Have you ever wondered what the best way to store your vegetables may be? Stay tuned and I'll share that with you coming right up. So there are several different ways that you can store your fresh vegetables once you bring them home or once you bring them inside from your garden. And today I'm going to share with you the different vegetables and the different types of storage methods. So for avocados, I know a lot of times when I brought home avocados, they haven't been totally ripe yet. They're a little bit too firm to use. And so you can keep avocados on the counter until they are ripe for about 4 to 7 days. If you're in a hurry to get that guacamole made, then you can also put your avocados into a paper bag and they will ripen a little bit faster. And you can even add an apple to the paper bag and that will help them ripen even faster. Once they are ripe, you can store them in the fridge for about 3 to 5 days. And I don't know if you knew this, but avocados can also be frozen. So when you want to freeze them, you simply pit them and you can then peel them, pit them, and then you can puree them with a little bit of lemon, just a little squeeze of lemon juice, which will help to stop them from going brown. And then you can place them in an airtight container and place them in the freezer, and they will store in the freezer for about 3 to 6 months. So for bell peppers, they should always be kept in the fridge once you either bring them inside or you have brought them home from the supermarket. You can keep them on the counter for a couple of days, I find typically, but after that you should keep them in the fridge to ensure that they last a little bit longer. If you're going to keep them in the fridge, they do last about 1 to 2 weeks. And you can put them in an airtight container, or you can store them in a food safe bag. I'm going to hesitate to say plastic. We're really trying to get away from using any types of plastics, and especially when it comes to food. But any type of food safe bag, and you can store them in there. They can also be frozen. So if you have peppers that you want to freeze because you're not going to use them up in time, you can simply wash them, you can slice them, and then you can put them on a cookie sheet in the freezer until they have frozen, and then you can take them from the cookie sheet and put them into an airtight food safe container and store them in the fridge. Or freezer, sorry, and they will last in the freezer about 3 to 6 months. So for broccoli, again, it should be kept in the fridge, and it can be stored in a food safe container or a food safe bag. And you don't want to wash your broccoli until you're about to use it, because it will encourage the degradation of your broccoli quicker. Any moisture that you're not able to get out from the broccoli while it's sitting in the fridge will cause it to just start to decay, and it won't be very good. So you can put it in the fridge, you can store it in an airtight food safe bag or container, and when you're going to use it would be the best time then to wash it before use. And once your broccoli has been cooked, if you have some left over, you can store it in the fridge for about 3 to 5 days. If you would like to freeze your broccoli, because maybe you have too much that you're not going to use, you can freeze it. Actually, I was surprised to find that one out. And the way to do that is you want to wash it, cut it into smaller chunks, and then you can blanch it. And by blanching it, what that means is you would put it into some boiling water just for about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes, just real quick. And then you would bring it out and you would have it in a bowl and put it in some ice cold water really quick so that the temperature comes down right away and the broccoli doesn't continue cooking. Once you've blanched it and put it in the ice cold water, then you can remove the excess moisture and then put it in an airtight container and put it in the freezer. Brussels sprouts. You want to store them in the fridge, and you don't want to wash them until you're ready to use them. You're going to store them in a food safe bag or container, and they will last, they say about 3 to 5 days. I've had Brussels sprouts last much longer in the fridge, and it really depends on your fridge, the temperature, where you keep them in the fridge, that kind of thing. But you can also freeze them. So if you have some that are, you're not going to use in the next little while, you can do the same thing. You can wash them well. You can cut off sort of the bottom part of them, and then you can cut them. I would just slice them in half, and you can blanch them again really quick into the boiling water for about a minute or so. Pull them out and put them into some chilled water or ice cold water. Remove the excess moisture, and then you can put them in an airtight container into the freezer, and they will actually last about 12 to 18 months in there. Cabbage. So cabbage is very similar to the Brussels sprouts. They should be kept in the fridge. You can put them in a food safe bag or container, and then you'll want to wash it just as you're about to use it. And if you don't use all of your cabbage, actually, just so you know, cabbage can be actually kept in the fridge for quite a long time. You can actually keep it 1, maybe even up to 2 months in the fridge in ideal conditions. And then again, if you're not going to use all of it, I would certainly use my cabbage before 1 to 2 months was to go by. But if you didn't think you were going to use it, you can also blanch and wash, cut into small pieces, blanch it, and then remove the excess moisture, and then store it in the freezer, and it will actually last in the freezer for about 18 months. Carrots, they should be kept in the fridge. Actually, you're going to find there's not too many vegetables that shouldn't. And I was surprised. I was sort of thinking that there might be more vegetables that could be kept on the counter. And I was thinking I was storing too many of my vegetables in the fridge. But with looking into this a little bit deeper, I found that most of them should stay in the fridge. So they will keep in the fridge for about 3 to 4 weeks. And you'll just want to keep an eye on, how long they've, when you purchase them at the store, they sort of have a tag on them or a stamp on the bag telling you when they were harvested and bagged up. So keep that in mind too when you bring them home from the grocery store. We may say that they're going to keep about 3 to 4 weeks, but that also depends how long they may have been at the store, how long, they were packaged and sitting there. And you can keep those in a food safe bag or container, and they can also be frozen. Same thing, you'll want to wash, peel them, and then slice them into sort of thicker chunks. You can blanch those quickly in some boiling water, put them into the ice cold water quick, and then remove the excess water, and then put them in the freezer in an airtight container. And something else to keep in mind is that if you have some cooked carrots, so if you've made a meal and you do have some left from the meal that you want to keep, they will stay in the fridge for about 3 to 5 days as long as they're in a food safe container. Cauliflower. So cauliflower should always be kept in the fridge when you bring it home. It can be stored in a food safe bag or container, and you don't want to, kind of like broccoli especially, you don't want to wash it until you are ready to use it, because again, moisture will get trapped into the florets, and then it can actually cause the quicker degradation of the vegetable. Cauliflower will last in the fridge about a week. Although again, I've had mine last longer, and it just really depends again how long ago it was picked, and when you bring it home, how long it's been sitting in that plastic wrap in the store, that type of thing. If you've cooked some and you want to keep it in your fridge for a little bit, if you've got some left over you want to use for another meal, it will keep for about 3 to 5 days. You can also freeze cauliflower. You can wash it, cut it into small pieces, blanch it, put it into the chilled water, and then remove the excess moisture, and then you can store it in the freezer for about 12 to 18 months. Celery will keep in the fridge for about on average 1 to 2 weeks. And if it's been cooked, although I don't really cook my celery, but I guess there are some people that do, I prefer it to be sliced up into a salad, maybe stir fried. I guess that would be true. I would stir fry celery and that type of thing. And if it's cooked, it can be kept for about 3 to 5 days, 1 to 2 weeks if it's just been cut up and kept in the fridge in a food safe container or bag. And surprisingly, it can be frozen. That's a new one for me. I didn't know that. But you can wash it, cut it into chunks, blanch it, soak it in the chilled water quickly, remove the moisture, and then put it in an airtight container. And it will last for about 10 to 12 months in the freezer. Corn. So there's a couple different ways to store it. It should be kept in the fridge, and it should be stored in a food safe bag or container. Generally, the best idea with corn is to keep the husk and the silk on the corn until you're about to use it. However, oftentimes you'll find that corn in the store has already had the husk. You might find them in a package where, they've already had all that stuff taken off, which can be super convenient. But if you've purchased them like that, you want to make sure that they are in a food safe container or food safe bag. They will keep for about 3 to 5 days and sometimes longer. Again, everybody's fridge is a little bit different. And if you want to freeze corn, you can actually freeze it right on the cob, or you can freeze the kernels. I would find that it'd probably be best to freeze the kernels and keep them for use later on. If you want to do that, then you want to do the same process. Remove the husk, remove the silk from it, which is those little strands. You'll want to wash, and then you can blanch it, and then you can freeze in an airtight container. If you're going to do the kernels, if you're going to freeze those, you can husk, remove the silk, blanch, and then you can cut, once it's been blanched and chilled quickly, you can then cut the kernels off the corn and then put those into a bag and store them in the freezer. A bag, a food safe bag, or an airtight container. Cucumber. This one will store in the fridge. In the crisper drawer is typically best, and it can be stored in a food safe bag or container. This is one that I'm sure you can imagine would not do well being frozen. So you'll want to use it up fairly quickly after you bring it home from the store. And if you've sliced it up, perhaps you've put out a plate of sliced up cucumbers and you have some left, they will only keep in the fridge after they've been sliced up for about 1 or 2 days. So you want to eat it up fairly quickly after that point. An eggplant. This one will be stored in the fridge, and it is stored in a food safe bag or container. And it will typically keep in the fridge for about 5 to 7 days. And you can actually freeze it. Not something I would have thought of freezing, but you can. You can wash it, you can peel it and cut it into 1/4 inch slices or 1/3 inch slices. And then you would blanch it and then plunge it into the chilled water after you've blanched it. And then you're gonna, in the chilled water, you're gonna add a little bit of lemon juice as well, and then you can pull it out and sort of remove the excess moisture, and then you can store it in an airtight container, and that should keep for about 6 to 8 months in the freezer. Green beans, one of my favorite. I just love green beans steamed with a little bit of butter and salt and pepper. So these ones don't last very long for me. You don't want to wash them until you're ready to use them. They would be stored in the fridge in a food safe bag or container, and they can be frozen. Again, if you're going to freeze them, you'll wash them and cut the little ends off, maybe cut them in half or in 1.5 inch little pieces. And then you would blanch them again, and then quickly into the ice cold water, remove the excess moisture, and in an airtight container, and they will keep in the freezer for about 12 to 18 months. Green onions should always be kept in the fridge. They should be stored in a food safe bag or container. And I'm surprised again with this one that they can be frozen. I wouldn't have imagined that, just with sort of their delicate stems. But in the fridge, they will keep about 1 to 2 weeks. You don't want to wash them until you're ready to use them. And when you freeze them, you're going to wash them, cut the little ends off, and then put them into 1.5-inch pieces. You don't blanch these ones. You just simply store them in a food safe bag or container and just put them in the fridge, in the freezer. Other onions. Now, some people will have different storage options for these. Usually the best, I'd love to have a root cellar. That would be my favorite thing. And eventually I might have one day to store different things from our garden that we do, like potatoes and onions, and even carrots can be stored at a root cellar, along with other different vegetables. But for these, best to keep them you can keep them in the fridge. You can store them, and I didn't actually put this on the slide, but you can store them in a cool, dry space that has like good air circulation as well. If you cut them up, they will only keep for a couple of days in the fridge, and they actually can be frozen. I would have never thought of freezing my onions, but you can peel them and then you can slice them or chop them, and then you can put them in an airtight container and they will keep in the freezer for up to 12 months. Kale. So this is a great one. I actually really love kale, and we grew kale in our garden this past summer, and we grew so much of it. And we did end up having to freeze a lot of it because it was just an incredible amount that grew. It was unbelievable. So I do use them in smoothies quite often. That's what I find I use them in most, or in salads to cut up. And so for these, you don't want to wash them kale, you don't want to wash it until you're going to use it. It should be kept in the fridge in a food safe bag or container, and you can freeze it. And we did freeze a lot this year, so we cut it up into smaller pieces, and we just put them into sort of food safe bags and made sure we removed all of the air. I didn't blanch mine, but I am told that that's one of the better ways to do it, is to blanch it and then chill it. You only want to blanch it for like just less than a minute, and then put it in the chilled water, and then again into an airtight container in the freezer once you've removed the excess moisture. But for me, I simply washed mine. I removed the stems, I chopped it up into little pieces, and then I put it into freezer safe bags, and then I put it into the freezer, and I've still been using some of it from last summer, and it can keep for about 10 to 12 months. So lettuce should be kept in the fridge in a food safe bag or container. I don't wash, and I don't suggest you wash it until you're ready to use it. Make sure you do wash it thoroughly, and it can be, I guess you could wash it if you're gonna use one of those salad spinners. So if you want to wash it thoroughly and prepare it ahead of time, if you've got a busy schedule, that is one you could probably do that with, and just make sure that you do get all of the excess moisture off, and then it can go into a food safe bag, and it can be kept in the crisper drawer of your fridge, and it will keep about 7 to 10 days. And it doesn't freeze. Obviously, lettuce is just one of those ones that wouldn't freeze. Mushrooms, not something I eat. I know a lot of people love these. I have just never been able to eat mushrooms, but these ones should always be kept in the fridge. And they should be kept in a paper bag. You definitely don't want to keep mushrooms in a plastic bag. It will cause them to break down very quickly. And you don't want to wash them until you're about ready to eat them. Now, they will keep in the fridge for about 1 to 2 days, but if you cook them, so if you want to cook them in a little bit of butter and salt and pepper, you can actually do that ahead of time. Maybe if you're cooking some to, prepare them for a meal or for meals, maybe to add to eggs or whatever in the morning, you can do that ahead of time, and they will keep in the fridge about 3 to 5 days if you do that. And they can actually be frozen. These ones, same thing like storing them in the fridge, you'll want to cook them with a little butter and salt and pepper, and then you can put them in an airtight container, and they will keep in the freezer for about 10 to 12 months, and you can just pull them out to use them, in a stir fry or whatever you want to do at that point. Peas, another one of my favorites. I like the snap peas and just eating them like right in the pod. Those are great, especially if I'm out in the garden. Just snap some of those off and snack on them. They're absolutely great. I can't wait till summer comes and we can grow some more of those. These will keep for about 3 to 5 days in the fridge. You don't want to wash them until you're ready to eat them. And of course you can freeze them depending on the type of pea that you've got. You'll probably want to wash them, shell them, and then you'll blanch them for about 1.5 minutes, and then plunge them into the cold water, and then remove the excess moisture, and then put into an airtight container. They will actually keep for about 18 months in the freezer. Potatoes. These ones can be stored actually in a cool, dry place with good air circulation. Much like I was talking about those whole onions. You do not need to keep these in the fridge, and you can actually freeze them as well. So if you want to prepare some, or if you have like an excess amount of potatoes, or if you want to prepare some in advance, you can wash, peel them, cut them into chunks, and you'll want to boil them just until they're slightly tender, and then you'll pull them out of the boiling water. You can put them in a cool bath just for a moment, remove the excess moisture, and then you can put them into an airtight container, and they will store for about 10 to 12 months in your freezer. And then you can use them for different soups or whatever else you want to use them. Radishes. These should always be kept in the fridge. They should be stored in a food safe bag or container, and they will last for about 10 to 14 days in the fridge, and they cannot be frozen. Spinach should be kept for about no longer than 5 to 7 days in the fridge. You don't want to wash them until you're ready to use, and you can keep it in a food safe bag or container. And if you cook your spinach, you can keep it, so if you have some leftovers, you can keep it in the fridge for about 3 to 5 days after, and you can freeze spinach. You'll want to wash, cut off the stems, and the woody parts. You can blanch that just quickly, and then plunge into chilled water, and then drain off the moisture and store it in an airtight container. And your spinach will last for about 10 to 12 months in the freezer. Tomatoes. Tomatoes can actually be kept on the counter. They can stay there for about 1 to 5 days, and sometimes a little longer. Of course, it'll depend on the temperature in your living space, all that kind of thing. If you've got tomatoes that you've purchased that aren't quite ripe, you can ripen them in a paper bag faster. And if you do store them in the fridge, they will last about 5 to 7 days in a food safe bag or container. And they can be frozen. You can simply cut them up. You can stew them a little bit if you wanted to, wash them, cut off any little stems, that kind of thing. You can cut them up and put them in a container into the freezer, or you can cook them and put them in the freezer or make sauces. They're pretty flexible that way. Turnip is usually kept in the fridge, and it is stored in a food safe bag or container. And it can be frozen as well. You can freeze it by washing it, peeling it, cutting it into cubes, blanching it, plunging it into the chilled water, and then storing it in an airtight container, and it will last in your freezer for about 10 months. Zucchini should be always kept in the fridge. It can be stored in a food safe bag or container. You don't want to wash it until you're ready to eat, and it will last in your fridge for about 2 to 3 weeks. Which is great. And of course you can make all kinds of great things with zucchini. It's a great flexible vegetable to use for noodles and that type of thing if you don't want to be having pasta. So you can do that, and you can freeze it. So you can wash it, you can slice it, peel it of course, and then you can put it in, you can grate it, you can make the zoodles ahead of time if you want. You can blanch it quickly, plunge it into the chilled water, and then you can put it in an airtight container. And so, for example, if you come home from work and you want to have zoodles, is what we call them, which is the zucchini noodles, and you want to have that for dinner, you can already just pull it out of the freezer and you'll have it ready in just minutes. You can just plunge it into some boiling water real quick and strain it, and then add your sauce. And that's it for what I have for you today, and I hope you have enjoyed this. And if you have any questions, please post in the comments below, or if you have any other suggestions you want to share, I would be happy to see those. If you would like to like and subscribe for more videos, that would be great, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.